Before we get started taking a look at how we actually implement LazyT, let's first take a look at some of the code that we're going to be using to show how to use LazyT. I first have an order. It's a pretty straightforward class. Takes an order ID, invoice ID, order amount, and items count. This is standard orders class. I then have a factory. This factory will fetch me a list of hardwired orders, or just a list of single orders. You'll notice that I've added these console.write lines. This is so that when we actually start using Lazy, you can actually see when this code is actually being called. Finally, we have another class, which is order calculator. It's a very simple class that takes in a list of orders and returns a calculated value of those orders based on the order amount. In this, we're basically just going to iterate over using sum, return that value, give it back to the caller. And again, we'll console.write line this as well so we can tell when it was actually executed. So let's say that we don't have LazyT provided to us. We want to write some code that grabs orders and then calculates the total. How would that look? So I'm going to create this method here called going non-lazy. And I'll just provide a couple of these objects in here. And going non-lazy is going to just simply write out something that I'm starting something. And then I'm just going to grab a list of orders, grab my order, and push that into our calculator. So now that I've actually created my instance of my objects, let's go ahead and run this application to see when things actually get called. Some applications run, it tells me it's running a non-lazy, and it would fetch the single order, fetch the list of orders, and calculates them all right in real time. Now this makes sense, but what if we actually had some business process that we wanted to do? So what I did is I just changed this here to add a line here between the gathering of some data and actually calculating. I'm actually going to do some kind of business process. But let's say my business process, for sake of argument, does not utilize this list of orders. Let's say it gathers some more data or does something else. Well, if I rerun the application, you'll see that I again fetch my single order to my list of orders. Then I do my business stuff, and then I calculate my list. Okay, that's pretty straightforward and what we'd probably expect. Now, if I do this in a non-lazy manner, I should actually be able to defer the gathering of this data until after my business processes take place. So let's go ahead and create a new method here called going lazy. And in going lazy, we're going to do basically the same thing. So I'm going to copy this here. But instead of actually doing calling into order factory directly, I need to utilize the lazy namespace and lazy type. To do this, what I need to do is go new lazy. And as soon as I do lazy, you'll see I get it. And it takes a generic. So my generic here is going to be of order. And then you'll also see that lazy, get my IntelliSense, lazy is takes a function. So what we want to do here is actually provide a method that will be called. So let's go ahead and convert the other one to lazy as well. This one is a list of orders, so I need to change the signature of the generic to be a list of orders. And that's essentially how I can utilize lazy. But there's a couple things we want to pay attention to when you're using a type that is wrapped in the lazy keyword. So single order now has a few extra methods attached to it. Is value created and value. The is value created will actually return a boolean to tell you whether or not it's actually executed the function that you described in your lazy syntax. The value is the actual value that was returned from that. So it's actually creating the instance right then and there. So if you call value, that is when it'll trigger to call the method. And it will then change the is value created to be true. And also you'll invoke that method as well if you use the .toString. So now we've created our instances again. Let's go ahead and do some important businessy stuff. Let's first write line out to see if we've actually invoked anything yet. So let's do this. Console. What I did, I just basically will write line out this to ensure that we have not actually invoked those function calls. In here I'm going to call single value just to actually invoke this. And then I'm actually going to now calculate my orders. But instead of passing in a list of orders, I do need to actually invoke the value in this because I want to invoke it right then and there. And we'll return that back. So let's run our application again. Let's see what we get. So in the top half I get my non-lazy, and I get the same order in which I had before, which is I fetch them both and then do some business stuff and then calculate them. In my lazy scenario I have lazy, but then I do my business logic right down there. So I'm skipping over the gathering of the single instance or the list of orders. Both statuses are both false at this point in time. I now fetch a single order, and then I fetch my list, and then I fetch or calculate my list of orders. And if I was to come back here and reapply these now, you'll see that the status of them has been set to true, which tells me they have been invoked. So let's briefly talk about the power that this lazy provides us. You know, in some scenarios where you're actually doing a lot of data gathering and potentially not using the data based on some, conditional logic within a method or within a set of methods, what's the point in gathering that data? Yes, you could just move this function to the bottom, but maybe you need it up at the top for other reasons potentially. So you may not have the ability to put it in one spot. Maybe based on conditionals you need to put it in use it in 2 or 3 spots. Having this lazy allows you to create your pointer to it up top and then just basically use it when the time is exactly right and the last responsible moment. So I hope you can see that using lazy is not only easy, but it could also be very effective for your application in terms of performance. But also do keep in mind, this is not something you should be using everywhere. This is not the silver bullet or the magic pill. So I hope you learned something. Until next time.